Grit by Angela Duckworth. Welcome to Volume and Vision. There is a moment in almost every difficult journey when something inside you says, enough. It may happen after failing an exam you were certain you would pass. It may happen after applying for dozens of jobs and hearing nothing back. It may happen when you have spent months learning a skill and still feel like a beginner. Or perhaps it happens when you look around and see other people moving ahead while you seem to be standing in the same place. That moment is important, because success is not always decided when everything is going well. Sometimes it is decided in the quiet moment when you are disappointed, tired, uncertain, and nobody is forcing you to continue. What do you do then? Do you walk away, or do you take a breath, learn from what happened, and begin again? That question lies at the heart of grit. We often assume that extraordinary people must possess something extraordinary from the beginning. Perhaps they were naturally intelligent. Perhaps they were born talented. Perhaps they had unusual confidence. Perhaps they simply got lucky. But when we look closely at long-term achievement, another pattern begins to appear. Many successful people are not necessarily the most talented people in the room. They are often the people who stay committed after the excitement disappears. They continue learning when progress becomes slow. They continue practicing when nobody is watching. They continue after failure. And most importantly, they continue long enough for their effort to compound. This is what makes grit so powerful. Grit is not about being fearless. It is not about working every minute of every day. And it is not about refusing to change your plans. Grit is the ability to care deeply about something and remain committed to pursuing it over time. It is passion combined with perseverance. And that sounds simple, but living it is anything but simple. Because starting something is easy. Continuing is difficult. Think about the beginning of a new goal. You feel excited. You make plans. You imagine the person you will become. Perhaps you decide that from tomorrow you will wake up early, exercise, study for 3 hours, learn a new skill, and completely transform your life. The first few days can feel amazing. Then comes the ordinary day. You wake up tired. The weather is unpleasant. Your phone is nearby. Your motivation is low. The work you planned suddenly feels boring. And this is where the fantasy ends and the real journey begins. Motivation can help you start. But motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes. Grit begins when motivation disappears and you still have a reason to continue. Imagine two people learning the same difficult skill. Both begin with enthusiasm. After a few weeks, both encounter problems. One decides that the difficulty is evidence that the skill is not meant for them. The other sees the difficulty as evidence that there is something they still need to learn. The situation is identical. The interpretation is different, and that difference can shape an entire future. When you tell yourself, I cannot do this, your brain hears a conclusion. When you tell yourself, I cannot do this yet, your brain hears a challenge. That small shift can change how you respond to failure. Instead of protecting yourself from difficulty, you begin using difficulty as information. This is especially important because every worthwhile goal contains a period where improvement feels almost invisible. You study, you practice, you repeat, and nothing seems to happen. You begin wondering whether your effort is being wasted. But progress does not always announce itself. Sometimes growth happens underneath the surface. Think about a tree during its earliest stage of development. From the outside, very little may appear to be happening. But beneath the ground, roots are spreading. The foundation is being built before the visible growth appears. Your abilities can develop in exactly the same way. You may spend weeks struggling with a subject. Then one day, something that once looked impossible suddenly becomes understandable. You may practice speaking for months and still feel awkward. Then one day, you realize that you can express yourself naturally. You may solve programming problems for weeks and feel completely lost. Then suddenly, patterns begin appearing. The work was never pointless. You simply could not see all of its effects yet. This is why patience is not passive. Patience is continuing to work while the results are still invisible. And this leads to another important lesson. Effort matters, but not all effort is equally useful. You can spend enormous amounts of time doing something and barely improve. A student can sit with a textbook for 8 hours while avoiding the chapters they don't understand. A musician can repeatedly play the same comfortable piece without addressing technical weaknesses. A person learning programming can watch tutorial after tutorial without ever building anything independently. Time alone does not guarantee growth. What matters is purposeful practice. Purposeful practice means identifying what you are weak at and deliberately working on it. If you keep making the same type of mistake, study that mistake. If you cannot solve a particular kind of problem, practice that kind of problem. If you receive useful feedback, do not immediately defend yourself. Listen to it, ask what it reveals, then adjust. This is uncomfortable because it forces you to confront the gap between where you are and where you want to be. But that gap is where improvement happens. Comfort can make you feel capable. Challenge makes you more capable. And there is a powerful reason people with grit are willing to experience this discomfort. They are not obsessed with proving that they are already good. They are focused on becoming better. That distinction changes everything. If your goal is to prove that you are talented, every mistake becomes threatening. If your goal is to improve, every mistake becomes useful. Failure stops being an attack on your identity. It becomes feedback. Consider a student who receives a disappointing result. There are two ways to interpret it. The first is, I am not intelligent enough. The second is, my current preparation was not good enough. The first statement closes the door. The second opens one. Because if the problem is your preparation, you can change your preparation. Perhaps you misunderstood the concepts. Perhaps you practiced too little. Perhaps you studied without testing yourself. Perhaps you spent your time on easy topics because they felt comfortable. The score itself cannot tell you everything, but it can give you information. The same principle applies outside education. A failed interview does not necessarily mean you are unemployable. A failed business idea does not necessarily mean you can never build a business. A poor performance does not necessarily mean you lack potential. Sometimes failure simply reveals what needs to be improved. This is why resilient people ask different questions. Instead of asking, why does this always happen to me, they ask, what can I learn from this? Instead of asking, why am I not as good as that person, they ask, what can I learn from someone who is ahead of me? Instead of saying, I failed, therefore I should stop, they say, that attempt failed, so what should the next attempt look like? The difference is subtle, but over years, subtle differences become enormous. There is another trap that can destroy perseverance. Comparison. You see someone who is already successful and compare yourself with them. You see their results, their confidence, their skills, their income, their achievements, but you rarely see the years that came before those results. You may be comparing your first chapter with someone else's 10th. That is an unfair comparison. Someone may look naturally brilliant because you are seeing them after thousands of hours of practice. Someone may appear lucky because you did not see the opportunities they created through years of preparation. Someone may look confident because you never witnessed the period when they were uncertain. So instead of constantly asking whether you are ahead of other people, ask whether you are ahead of the person you used to be. What can you do today that you could not do last year? What mistake do you understand now? What habit have you built? What weakness have you reduced? What skill has become easier? Those improvements may seem small, but small improvements repeated for a long time can create extraordinary differences. This is the power of consistency. We often imagine success as one enormous breakthrough, one perfect opportunity, one lucky decision, one extraordinary performance. But real progress is usually much less dramatic. It looks like showing up again. Then again. Then again. It looks like studying when the chapter is boring. It looks like practicing when nobody is impressed. It looks like fixing one mistake, then discovering another, then fixing that one too. It looks ordinary, and that is precisely why so many people underestimate it. We are attracted to dramatic change. But life is often transformed by repeated ordinary actions. Consider physical fitness. One intense workout cannot transform your body, but hundreds of reasonable workouts performed consistently can. The same applies to learning. One night of extreme studying may help temporarily, but regular learning over months can completely change your understanding. The same applies to careers. One successful project may open a door, but years of building skills can make you capable of walking through many doors. Consistency creates compounding. And compounding is difficult to appreciate while it is happening. When you invest a small amount of effort today, the immediate result may look insignificant hundreds of times and the result becomes impossible to ignore. This is why people with grit are willing to think in years rather than days. They understand that meaningful goals require time. And time creates another challenge. Boredom. We usually talk about failure as if failure is the greatest enemy. But sometimes boredom is more dangerous. Failure at least gives you emotion. Boredom gives you almost nothing. The same exercise, the same textbook, the same practice, the same routine, the same small improvement, day after day. This is where many people leave. Not because they discovered that their goal was impossible, but because they stopped finding the process exciting. Yet mastery requires repetition. The person who becomes excellent is often willing to do ordinary things extraordinarily consistently. That does not mean every day will be productive. You are not a machine. There will be days when you need rest. There will be periods when life becomes difficult. There will be times when your energy drops. Grit does not mean destroying yourself. Rest can be part of persistence. Changing your strategy can be part of persistence. Slowing down can be part of persistence. The important distinction is between resting and abandoning. A person can pause without quitting. A person can change direction without giving up on growth. A person can recover and return. This is particularly important because people sometimes misunderstand perseverance as stubbornness. Imagine someone using a strategy that clearly does not work. They keep repeating it simply because they believe changing the approach would mean weakness. That is not grit, that is rigidity. True perseverance protects the mission while allowing the method to evolve. If one road is blocked, search for another. If your study technique is failing, change it. If your business model is failing, rethink it. If your training plan is damaging you, adjust it. The commitment should be to meaningful progress, not to one particular method. And underneath all of this is something even more powerful. Purpose. A goal tells you what you want. Purpose explains why you want it. And when the journey becomes difficult, the why becomes extremely important. Suppose someone wants to become financially successful. That goal alone may not be enough to sustain years of effort. But perhaps they want to create security for their family. Perhaps they want freedom over their time. Perhaps they want to build something useful. Perhaps they want to prove to themselves that they can turn an idea into reality. Suddenly the goal has meaning. And meaningful goals are easier to protect during difficult periods. This does not mean you need to discover some enormous life mission immediately. Your purpose can develop gradually. You may not know exactly what you want at 20. You may change your direction at 25. You may discover new interests at 30. That is normal. Purpose is not always something you find fully formed. Sometimes you build it through experience. You try something. You learn. You discover what matters to you. You fail. You adapt. And gradually your direction becomes clearer. So do not panic if you do not have your entire life planned. You do not need to know the destination of every road. You need to know the next meaningful step. That is another secret of long journeys. Large goals can become overwhelming when you stare at the entire distance. Instead, reduce the goal to today's action. If you want to write a book, write today's pages. If you want to pass an examination, study today's topic. If you want to become physically stronger, complete today's training. If you want to change your career, learn today's skill. You cannot live 10 years in one day. You can only live today. And today is where every long journey is actually built. There will be moments when you feel behind. Someone will succeed faster. Someone younger than you will achieve something you haven't. Someone may appear to work less and receive more. That can be painful, but another person's timeline does not invalidate yours. You don't need their speed. You need your direction. Because the real danger is not moving slowly. The real danger is constantly abandoning one path for another because someone else appears to be moving faster. You start learning one skill. Then you see another person succeeding somewhere else. You change direction. You start another skill. Then another opportunity appears. You change again. Years pass. You have experience with many things but mastery in none. Grit requires enough stability to stay with something long enough for your effort to become meaningful. That does not mean never exploring. It means learning the difference between exploration and permanent distraction. Sometimes you have to give an interest enough time to become a skill. Because beginners often mistake difficulty for lack of potential. The first stage of learning is uncomfortable. You are slow. You make mistakes. You need help. You feel behind. But that is not evidence that you should quit. It is what being a beginner feels like. Remember this the next time you begin something difficult. You are allowed to be bad before you become good. You are allowed to be confused before you become clear. You are allowed to fail before you succeed. The only requirement is that you keep learning. And eventually, something changes. The difficult thing becomes familiar. The unfamiliar becomes manageable. The skill that once required enormous concentration begins to feel natural. Then people may look at you and say, "You are talented." But they will see the result. They will not see the repetition that created it. They will not see the boring days. They will not see the failed attempts. They will not see the moments when you almost stopped. And perhaps that is why grit is so easy to misunderstand. From the outside, persistence looks like confidence. From the inside, it can feel like uncertainty combined with one simple decision. I will try again, not because I know that the next attempt will succeed, but because I know that stopping guarantees nothing will change. That is the difference. You do not need certainty to continue. You need enough purpose to take the next step. So if you are currently struggling with a goal, don't ask only whether you are talented enough. Ask whether you are willing to learn. Ask whether you are willing to practice. Ask whether you are willing to change your strategy. Ask whether you are willing to tolerate the period when progress is invisible. And most importantly, ask whether the goal matters enough to you that you are willing to stay with it when the excitement disappears. Because the world tends to celebrate the final result. But your character is built during everything that happens before it. The early mornings, the repeated attempts, the disappointing results, the boring practice, the difficult conversations, the moments of doubt, the decision to return, again and again. That is where grit is developed. Not in one heroic moment, but through hundreds of ordinary decisions. And perhaps your biggest advantage is not that you are already extraordinary. Perhaps your biggest advantage is simply that you are willing to keep becoming better. So take your goal seriously. But don't worship the goal so much that you become afraid of changing the route. Practice deliberately. Don't confuse time spent with progress made. Learn from failure. Don't turn one bad result into a permanent judgment about yourself. Build consistency. Don't expect every day to be perfect. And find a reason that matters. Because when the excitement disappears, purpose can keep you moving. Remember this: you do not have to be the fastest person. You do not have to be the most naturally gifted. You do not have to get everything right on the first attempt. You simply need to remain willing to learn, adapt, and return to the work. One day of effort may not change your life. One week may not change it. Even 1 month may not produce the result you want. But give meaningful effort enough time, and something begins to happen. Your skills change. Your habits change. Your confidence changes. Your identity changes. And eventually, your results begin to reflect the person you have become. That is the quiet power of grit. The ability to keep moving when the finish line is still far away. The ability to turn failure into information. The ability to turn practice into skill. The ability to turn purpose into persistence. And the ability to keep showing up long enough for small efforts to become something much larger. So the next time you fail, don't immediately call yourself a failure. The next time progress feels slow, don't assume that nothing is happening. The next time someone moves ahead of you, don't abandon your path. And the next time you lose motivation, remember why you started. You don't need to conquer your entire future today. You only need to decide what the next step is. Then take it. And when tomorrow comes, take another. Because extraordinary lives are rarely built by people who never struggle. They are built by people who learn how to continue through the struggle. This is volume and vision. If this journey through grit gave you a new way to look at success, remember that the most powerful lessons are not the ones we simply hear. They are the ones we put into practice. Subscribe to Volume and Vision for more powerful ideas from books that can change the way you think, work, and live. And until the next journey, keep learning, keep growing, and most importantly, keep going.